Erisu again. This is just a little quick message first before I get into the review. Somebody asked me, why do I not say what the next review is going to be? And the reason for that is because I don't want to disappoint anyone, because a lot of the time, for example, I have 22 episodes of this planned out already. Like, I have 22 episodes set aside. I know what I want to say about them. However, they are subject to change. Another figure might come out, I might get a new figure, and I'm more excited about that one, so I'll talk about that instead. But that's what, and I like to keep a little bit of mystery. So, for example, talking about change, this week's episode was going to be of a Gamera figure, but I got something else in the week, and I thought it was quite funny, so I just wanted to have a look at this instead. So yeah. So today's review is this unknown brand Chinese sort of bootleg figure. Now, if you remember back to when I was reviewing the 6-inch Imperial Godzilla in my first review, and I mentioned that there were a lot of Chinese companies making bootlegs of various figures. Now, there were two sort of major official Chinese companies that I know of, Imperial and Dormai, and they were making Godzilla figures. Dormai were making sort of mainly 12 to 15-inch figures, and Imperial were making the sort of 6 and 12-inch figures. But there were a lot of companies like this one here that were making sort of knockoffs and bootlegs of those molds and similar molds, and this is one of those unbranded bootlegs. Now, first and foremost, as ever, we're going to talk about the sculpt. Now, like the Imperial Godzilla, the sculpt on this is pretty bad. But again, as this is sort of a bootleg, it's even lower quality than the Imperial Godzilla. If you look at the face here, he looks pretty goofy. Like, the Imperial Godzilla looked pretty menacing in comparison, but this guy, I don't know, there's something silly about his face. It doesn't look as ridiculous from the side, because his eyes don't look as big, but when you look at him from the front, and his pupils are kind of going off in other directions and stuff, he just looks silly. Although I do like the fact that they've painted a tongue on the inside, that's interesting. But for the rest of the sculpt, all the teeth are individually sculpted. He's got a alright sort of texture to his skin, I suppose. Quite similar to the Imperial Godzilla, but again, not as well defined. The hands are a bit weird. The little finger there's a bit long, and on this side it's alright. What else? Well, his build is weird. He's a lot thinner than any Godzilla figure I've seen. His legs, his feet are quite similar to the Imperial Godzilla again, but only 3 toes and a lot shoddier sculpting. The tail is very similar, got the sort of the grooves all along it. There's more spines on the tail on this one. The spines are strange. They don't look anything like Godzilla, any of Godzilla's spines in any of the suits, so I don't know what the inspiration was for this. Like Imperial Godzilla, I can only assume that this is sort of an original design for Godzilla that's amalgamated from various other aspects of Godzilla suits. One thing to note with detailing it and sculpt and stuff, there's a lot of molding lines, like really, really obvious and really bad molding lines all along the legs there, and on that side, on his chest, going all the way up there, and on his head. Not that noticeable on the back really, but yeah, the molding lines on this figure are awful. So yeah, sculpt pretty poor, to be honest. As for paint job, he seems to be, his base color is this sort of pinky purple, that like sort of almost a fleshy color purple is the base color of the plastic, I believe. He has some white on his toes and on his fingernails, teeth and eyes. The eyes have the black pupils. He has a little bit of shading, I suppose. He has the gold splattered here, which, if you remember, the Imperial Godzilla had a silver chest. This seems to have gold, but only sort of on this side up here. Now if you look at the back, he has black. he's black on the back and on the tops of his arms, but if you put them down like that, the backs of the arms are purple. So you're going to have him sculpted like, posed like that if you want the paint to make sense. The back of his legs are also painted black. So on the back he is mostly black. The paint's very basic. It's sort of, you know, this is off to the side, the arms are painted on the wrong sides. It's pretty badly painted. No positives really over any of the other previous figures I've mentioned, apart from the fact his lips aren't weirdly red like the Imperial Godzilla. But otherwise, yeah, pretty poor paint job. In terms of articulations, he is exactly the same as the Imperial Godzilla. Both his arms rotate 360 degrees. Both of his legs will rotate 360 degrees. And his tail is jointed at the base here, and that will rotate 360 degrees. Articulation is probably the best thing about this figure. The articulation is very smooth, not just stiff. The arms rotate very nicely and quite easily. The legs are quite easy as well. And the tail is not stiff. So, yeah, articulation is probably the best point of this figure so far, to be honest. As for pricing, I paid 12 quid for this figure. They seem to sort of go for a wide range of things, to be honest. Like because they're sort of unbranded, it's difficult to give an exact price because I've seen many different companies use this mold with the same spikes and stuff in different sizes. This one I paid around 12 quid for. So I would say you can probably get them for under 25 quid, definitely. Probably under 20 quid. But it's whether or not you want to pay that for a sort of knockoff Chinese figure. So, in terms of scaling, I'm just going to have to move the camera back slightly so we can see. So here's the unbranded Chinese Godzilla. He stands roughly 10 inches. I'm going to compare him first of all with the 6-inch Imperial Godzilla that you saw in a previous review. You can see he's quite a lot bigger. If we turn him slightly, you can see, yeah, he's quite a lot bigger than the Imperial Godzilla. The Imperial Godzilla stands 6 inches. Just to show a comparison that you might get more, because I don't think many people have the Imperial Godzilla. Here is the Bandai Creations Final Wars Godzilla, which is 6 inches, and as you can see, this guy is quite a bit bigger. Actually, when I ordered this guy, the seller had listed that it was 12 inches, which turned out to be bollocks because this is 10 inches. I mean, I don't really mind because I suppose I don't really have that much room for 12-inch figures, but yeah, I would have maybe liked it to be 12 inches, but size-wise, it's alright. It obviously, it's not going to fit in with any of your Bandai figures. It's too small to fit in with 12-inch figures, and it's too big to fit in with 6-inch figures. So again, sizing is pretty bad. It's kind of standalone, really. You can't really have it fitting in with anything. Although, having said that, it is quite a striking figure. Like when you've got it on a shelf, it's a big pink Godzilla. You know, it's bigger than all the other figures I've got. So it's kind of eye-catching, I suppose. But the scaling is certainly nothing special. Just put Imperial Godzilla in there just to... So yeah, scaling is off, to be honest. So my final thoughts on this bootleg figure. He's kind of silly, he's kind of shitty, but there's a particular charm about this. The Imperial figures and the Dormai figures have always had kind of a charm for me. Obviously growing up with my first kaiju figure being the Imperial Godzilla, all the figures that are kind of knockoffs or similar brands like Dormai or this sort of unbranded one, they all have a particular charm to me because they remind me of my Imperial Godzilla, and it just reminds me of being a kid when, you know, detailing and sculpting didn't really matter that much and you just wanted a Godzilla toy. So again, I would recommend this for collectors who want something a bit different and maybe something a bit more obscure, or if you're a collector particularly of older figures from the 80s. But for serious collectors and new collectors, I maybe wouldn't recommend it if you're wanting to build up a worthwhile collection. As this is a bootleg, I'm pretty sure it's not really worth anything more than what you'd pay for it. It's not going to increase in value or anything, but it's a nice little thing for me to have, and I'm kind of happy that I got it. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say on this one, to be honest. It's a shorter review than normal, but it's just something that I found in the week, and I bought it, and yeah, I just got a little kick out of it. I thought it was funny, and I wanted to have a look at him. So that's been the third review. Next week, I'm going to try and do the figure I was going to review this week initially. So hopefully next week's will be a Heisei Gamera. But again, could be subject to change. So stick around, like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next review.